In the name of God, the most gracious, the most merciful. Praise be to God, and peace and blessings be upon the messenger of God, his family, his companions, and those who follow him. O God, there is nothing easy except what you make easy, and you make sorrow easy. If you will, O God, teach us what benefits us, and benefit us with what you have taught us, and increase us in knowledge. O God, make all our deeds purely for your noble countenance, and do not let anyone else have any part in them. O Lord of the worlds, welcome, dear friends, to this 19th session of the prophetic biography, the biography of our Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. We ask God, the blessed and exalted, just as we believed in him without seeing him, not to separate us from him until he admits us to his abode. We stopped in the previous session at the group or people who embraced Islam but to whom the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, did not reach. We mentioned that the Quraysh media campaign against the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, was a failure for the Quraysh, but an advantage for the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, that the call to Islam spread among the Arab tribes. When people heard of this call, they came forward and presented themselves to the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, even though the Prophet had not reached them. What we did not say in the previous session, and this is what we should focus on here, was the Prophet's practice, or the Prophet's method, or the Prophet's plan of keeping a number of Muslims outside Mecca. This is what the administrators and planners like to call a strategic reserve. The Prophet did not invite them to Mecca with him because he was under pressure at that time. Rather, he told each of them to remain in their place and with their tribe, and if they heard that he had appeared, then they should come. So, from the beginning, the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, was keen to ensure that all the Muslims were not in Mecca alone. This will come to us later, God willing, when we also discuss the issue of the migration to Abyssinia. It remains for us to begin following the course of the Islamic call, which is the beginning of the persecution of those who embraced Islam. We mentioned that the Quraysh confronted the Prophet's call, peace and blessings be upon him, with all the distortion and rumors they could muster about him, that he was a soothsayer, a magician, a poet, a madman, and that he caused discord between a man and his son and between a man and his father. We also mentioned that the Quraysh were not able to harm the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, personally. Why? Do you remember why the Quraysh did not seek to kill the Prophet? Yes, because he was under the protection of his tribe. All of the Quraysh's attempts were attempts to escape a civil war. This is one of the advantages, or rather, one of God's ways with his prophets. He sends them among the most prominent of their people so that the call to Islam has natural protection, allowing it to grow stronger and more firmly established. That is why the Prophet said, God did not send any prophet except among the elite of his people. We find this in God's words. They said, O Shu'aib, we do not understand much of what you say, and indeed, we see you among us as weak. Were it not for your fear, we would have stoned you. And in God's words, concerning the people of our master Salih, they said, we will surely attack him and his family by night. Then we will say to his guardian, we did not witness the destruction of his family, meaning an assassination attempt. And what else? We will surely be protected from it. Therefore, the first attempts to suppress this call was to go to Abu Talib, the leader of Banu Hashim, the leader of Banu Abd Manaf. They went to him 3 times. The first time, they spoke to him, and he responded to them gently, meaning he humbled them and gave them a kind reply. When they saw that the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, was still, they called to God. They went to him again, but this time the tone was harsh. This time it was a threat of civil war. They said, O Abu Talib, we swear by God that we cannot bear what we sees of the insulting of our gods and the belittling of our dreams. We have asked you to stop your nephew. Either you stop him, or we will argue with you. until only one of the two sides remains. It was a threat of civil war. All of Mecca would be an enemy of Banu Hashim or Banu Abd Manaf. Then Abu Talib became afraid and said to the Prophet, "May God bless him and grant him peace," saying to him, "O my nephew, do not burden me and your people with what we cannot bear." The Prophet, may God bless him and grant him peace, thought that his uncle had become too weak to spot him. So what did he say to him? He said to him the famous saying that we all remember. He said, "By God, uncle, even if they put the sun in my right hand and the moon in my left, on condition that I leave this matter until it is destroyed, until God brings it to you, and you are not among them, I will not leave it." Of course, this narration with this wording is weak. Folks, the narration with this wording is weak, but the correct narration has the same meaning. A correct narration is his saying, "May God bless him and grant him peace. Do you see this sun?" They said, "Yes." He said, "Can you light a flame from it? Can any of you bring a flame from this sun?" I am not able to claim this matter from you, on condition that you light a flame from it. So, the meaning is close, but what is the meaning? What is the meaning of the Prophet's steadfastness? May God bless him and grant him peace, unwavering steadfastness. When Abu Talib saw this determination in his nephew, he said, "Go forth, my nephew. By God, my nephew has never lied. Go forth with what your Lord has commanded you. By God, I will never surrender you." Here we return to the saying that truthfulness is the capital of the caller to Islam. Truthfulness is the capital of the caller to Islam. If there had been even the slightest doubt about the Prophet's truthfulness, his uncle's position would have been much weaker. But because the Prophet never lied, and we mentioned that the Prophet relied on this very truthfulness for which he was renowned when he proclaimed the message, he said, "If I were to tell you that horsemen were beyond this valley, about to attack you, would you believe me?" They said, "Yes, we have never known you to lie." Truthfulness is the capital of the caller to Islam. So here, when Abu Talib saw this determination, this steadfastness and this faith in his nephew, he strengthened his position and continued to protect him. Of course, Abu Talib was highly respected among his people. A third attempt was more of a bargaining tactic. They came to Abu Talib with a man named Amr ibn al-Walid, or Amr ibn al-Walid. The Arabs used to say Amr, not Amr. So they said, "O Abu Talib, this is Amr ibn al-Walid, a young man who has been destroyed in Quraysh, a young man who has been destroyed in Quraysh." It is similar to what I mean now. I am trying to get closer to a contemporary term. It means a bodybuilding champion. In our modern terminology, a young man who has been destroyed in Quraysh means the strongest, meaning the body, meaning something very great. So, we will give him to you on the condition that you hand over your nephew to us, for he has insulted your religion and your gods. What is Abu Talib? He is also an infidel who did not believe in what the Prophet, may God bless him and grant him peace, was sent with. So it is only a man for a man. So he said, "What a bad bargain you are making with me. You give me your son. Take him for yourselves, and I give you my son, and you kill him." So here, with these three attempts at intervals, the way was closed with Abu Talib, and the thought began now to torture those who had converted to Islam. But also the thought of torturing those who had converted to Islam was a fart, meaning it was torture within the law and the constitution. Torture within what? Within the law and the constitution. Because now if any infidel were to torture a Muslim, the possibility of, therefore, the solution they reached is the solution permitted by the prevailing law in Mecca, which is that each tribe should turn against those who converted to Islam from among them, and thus avoid the occurrence of civil war or avoid violating the prevailing law and constitution, because now each tribe has sovereignty over those within it. If someone tortures his slave or tortures his master, no one will control him, right? So, everyone is free to torture whomever they want. He tortures the one under his control. So, according to the law and constitution, what does this constitute in our current situation or circumstances? Of course, we don't have tribes now. What do we have? Countries. Yes, God bless you, we have states, and therefore, a state that tortures one of its citizens is free, it has complete sovereignty, and if any human rights organization says there is torture here, the spokesperson for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs comes out and says what? This is interference in internal affairs, so every state is free with its citizens, okay? So now the human being is a slave to the state. I mean, if we're going to clarify the picture, the human being is now a slave to the state, and therefore the state is the sole authority over him. Gives him permission to travel or prevents him from traveling, renews his residency, renews his citizenship, his passport, deprives him of education, deprives him of his rights. The important thing is that sovereignty over the citizen is no longer with the tribe, it has returned to the state, okay? So now, the Quraysh started torturing according to the law and the constitution. Every individual or every tribe turned against those who converted from among them so that no one would attack those who converted from another tribe. Here, a problem arises with sovereignty, okay, or this interference in internal affairs occurs. Okay, beautiful, of course, my good people. By the way, you are certainly following the news now, so you are following the movement that is happening in America, the university student movement that is happening in America in support of Gaza is completely wrong. At the beginning, they insulted them, considering that this is a demonstration and sit-in according to the law and the Constitution. What are they defending? The right to expression. When the matter increased and began to get out of hand, what does the state do? The law has changed, and so 2 days ago, a law was passed in Congress. Yes, a law that redefines anti-Semitism. When it redefines anti-Semitism, it broadens the definition. So what is happening falls within the realm of the forbidden. It means making the permissible forbidden. The situation before the law was passed is different from the situation after the law was passed. This is what we mentioned before, and I hope you forget this because this is a very dangerous matter. Legislation. The ability to legislate, or the authority to legislate, is the most dangerous authority that humans possess. A human who has the power to make the permissible forbidden and the forbidden permissible, the right wrong and the wrong right, is capable of controlling those he governs. Therefore, the greatest advantage of Islam is that it removed the right to legislate from humans and made it for God alone. And the right to legislate, my friends, is in the terminology of our scholars, the worship of people by people. When our master Rabbi Ibn Amir said, God sent us to bring people out of the worship of people to the worship of God, the Lord of people, what does this mean? A person or entity that has the power to make what is permissible, forbidden, has the power to legislate. This is worship. Therefore, when Adi bin Hatim al-Tai asked, he heard the Prophet, may God bless besides God. Adi bin Hatim said, O Messenger of God, we did not worship them. He said, do they not make permissible for you what is forbidden and forbid for you what is permissible? He said, yes. He said, that is your worship of them. This means that Islam is unique among all earthly systems and religions in this regard, that legislation in Islam, meaning what is permissible and forbidden, meaning what is right and wrong, is in the hands of God alone, not in the hands of the sultan, not in the hands of the prince, not in the hands of the ruler. Therefore, no one among the people has the power to make what is permissible forbidden or to make what is forbidden permissible. Of course, this is the real dilemma. This is the dilemma that Islam is above the state and the state is not above Islam. So what exactly is the problem between secularism and Islam? Is Islam above the state? Or is the state above Islam? Muslims believe that Islam is above the secular state. The secular state wants to be above Islam and above all other religions. Therefore, as you can see, what happened in America now is that the state, with its position and its authority, which is the authority to legislate, which is the authority of divinity, as Sheikh Sayyid Qutb, may God have mercy on him, called sovereignty, expanded the law to encompass what was permissible and lawful yesterday because it now threatens this system. Okay, fine. We concluded the last session with the hadith narrated by Ibn Majah and others. On the authority of our master Abdullah ibn Masud, may God be pleased with him. This hadith is the most famous regarding the issue of torture. It is the saying of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, that Abdullah ibn Masud was the first to declare his Islam, or the first to openly profess his Islam. 7 people, the Messenger of God, Abu Bakr, Amr, his mother, Suhaib, Bilal, and Miqdad. As for the Messenger of God, God protected him through his tribe, his uncle Abu Talib, which is clear. As for Abu Bakr, God protected him through his tribe. He was from the Banu Taym. Our master Abu Bakr, as we said, was a man from the elite of the pre-Islamic era. He was a merchant and a historian. The Quraysh knew their lineage and history perfectly. As for the rest, Ibn Masud said, the polytheists seized them, dressed them in iron armor, and exposed them to the scorching sun. None of them refused to comply with their demands, except Bilal, for he considered his life insignificant in the path of God. Of course, I don't know if any of you have experienced the heat of Mecca, or heat in general. We live in Istanbul. We just came from laughs. From a refrigerator. May God reward you and place it on the scale of your good deeds. Being in the heat, wearing iron armor, and being exposed to the sun. This, my friends, is severe torment, so severe that we must remember that even though the companions were the highest of people, they were still human. They were indeed the highest, but ultimately they were human. Ibn Masud said, none of them refused to comply with their demands, meaning they uttered the words of disbelief they wanted, except Bilal, for he considered his life insignificant in the path of God. Here, the expression considered his life insignificant is used. He sacrificed himself for the sake of God. This is a remarkable expression. Our master Bilal went beyond his nature, perhaps even his instincts. His heart and soul were too great to be affected by the physical torture inflicted upon him. Safwan ibn Umayyah ibn Khalaf was a slave of Umayyah ibn Khalaf. Umayyah ibn Khalaf would take him out when the sky was hot, or when the heat was intense, or when the midday sun was at its peak. He would take him to the open desert of Mecca, tie him up with a rope, and throw him to the boys. They would place him on the scorching sand and large rock on his chest. No one would escape. The truth is, we must also pause here and understand that torture, my friends, is something no one can stand against. Our generations, by the way, this is their right, since the advent of media and novels. These generations have developed romanticized perceptions of life. Of course, I don't know what stories this generation reads, but my generation, at least, read The Impossible Man by Adam Sabri. I don't know, I understand. One of you know, but of course, Adam Sabri, as an Egyptian intelligence officer, had legendary abilities. He could speak any language, drive anything, and beat anyone. He could withstand any torture, whether in Siberia or in the sands of Africa. I'm not just talking about novels, but also films and TV series. These generations have developed a romantic tendency, imagining that the hero transcends his human nature. This is incorrect. Only a rare few can endure torture, a rare few indeed, while most people are defeated by it. There's nothing wrong with that. Of course, a person is required to be patient as much as they can, but God Almighty forgave the one who uttered a word of disbelief. Regarding Amr, God revealed the verse, except for one who is forced to renounce his faith while his heart is at peace with belief. And then, when I talk to you about someone like Al-Miqdad ibn Amr, Al-Miqdad, my friends, was a great hero. When you read about Al-Miqdad in the novel, and you see Ibn Mas'ud mentioning that he accused Al-Miqdad of what they wanted, this Al-Miqdad was one of the great heroes, to the point that, when our master Umar ibn al-Khattab, our master Amr ibn al-As, was conquering Egypt and said to him, I want 4,000 or 8,000, our master Umar sent him 4,000 and sent him 4 with them, saying, you have 4,004 men, each worth 1,000, so you have 8,000. Of course, in our time, we didn't need jokes. Now, I mean, I'm not talking to you seriously, we're going to war. Laughter, but our master Umar really meant that among those 4 was Al-Miqdad. So, when you find a huge hero counting men for 0,000, you know the extent of the torture and the severity of what befell the Muslims, and glory be to God regarding this Al-Miqdad. You remember a hadith of one of the Tabi'in, whose name was Jubair ibn Nufair. Yes, his name was Jubair ibn Nufair. He was sitting in a gathering during the time of the Tabi'in after the death of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, and he saw Al-Miqdad. So he said, blessed are these eyes that saw the messenger of God. Meaning, when one looks at the eyes of our master Al-Miqdad, one reflects that these eyes saw the messenger of God. Then Al-Miqdad became angry and his expression changed. I was amazed that the man said nothing bad. Someone is saying to him, what is this? Follower saying, he says, blessed are the eyes that saw the messenger of God. We wish we had that. Then Al-Miqdad became angry, and I was amazed that the man said nothing but good or nothing bad. Then Al-Miqdad turned and said, what makes any of you wish to witness a scene that God has kept hidden from you? In colloquial terms, why would any of you wish to be in a place or a homeland that God has chosen not to witness? I mention this hadith to express to you the hardship that our master Al-Miqdad was going through. He said, the messenger of God, peace and blessings be upon him, was sent during a period of time without prophets, and there were people who saw no religion better than idol worship. others astray. So, if a man embraced Islam, he would see his father, brother, or son in hell because he would not embrace Islam. He said, so it was a hardship and a trial. A person's heart is opened to Islam, and his brother says, my beloved, knows he is in hell, and the messenger of God witnessed a people. Then they disbelieved in him. Meaning, you who wished to see the messenger of God, if you had lived during the time of the messenger of God, peace and blessings be upon him, you wouldn't know whether you would have been among the believers or among those who sided with their family, their interests, their tribe, what they were accustomed to and familiar with. So now, our master Al-Mikad is telling them, meaning, God has kept you from this scene, so you were saved from the ordeal, the hardship, and the trials that existed at that time. When you hear this from our master Al-Mikad, after about 30 years, you truly feel the severity of the torment that our master Al-Mikad, may God be pleased with him, endured. Okay, so the hadiths about torture are well known, but here I want to differentiate between two things, and this matter, my dear people, will also help you understand the Prophet's biography during the Meccan period. We can say that the torture that the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, endured in Mecca is divided into two phases. A phase before the death of his uncle Abu Talib, and the period after his death. The first period before the death of his uncle Abu Talib was one that we can say was limited to insults, curses, mockery, ridicule, and the like. As for what you hear in the hadiths about the entrails of a camel being thrown on him by Akbar ibn Abi Mayt, who strangled him severely, and similar matters that touched the body of the messenger of God, peace and blessings be upon him, these occurred after the death of his uncle Abu Talib. Therefore, the hadiths you read must differentiate between these two periods. But among the companions, especially those who were slaves, they faced severe hardship. Among them was our master Karbab ibn al-Arat. This Karbab was a slave who worked as a blacksmith. He belonged to a woman named Amr. When she learned that he had embraced Islam, she would heat an iron rod and place it on his back or head until he fainted. One day, they spread burning coals on the ground for him. They considered the coals to be burning coals. They placed it on it. Our master Karbab says, describing this to our master Omar, nothing extinguished the embers except the oil that dripped from my back. He covered his back, and it was covered with leprosy, or it was bone without flesh. This is our master Karbab. Therefore, our master Karbab is the one who came to the Prophet, may God bless him and grant him peace, and said to him, O Messenger of God, will you not pray for us? Will you not seek victory for us? The well-known narration in Bukhari states that the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, became angry and said, a man from among those who came before you, meaning in previous nations, would be brought forth, and a saw would be placed on the crown of his head. He would not be released until he was cut in two, and his flesh would be combed with iron combs down to his bones and sinews. But you are a people who are impatient. By God, this matter will be fulfilled, until a rider travels from Suder to Hadramaut, fearing none but God and the wolf for his sheep. Now, here is the point that Why did he respond so harshly to Bilal and Karbab? And Karbab, too, was subjected to severe torture. The best explanation I have seen from scholars regarding this is that the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, saw in Karbab some weakness or despair and therefore wanted to address it in this way. Otherwise, he, peace and blessings be upon him, when he passed by the family of Yasser while they were being tortured, would say, "Be patient, family of Yasser, for indeed your reward is paradise." The Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, wanted to strengthen the resolve of his companions, like the resolve of our master Karbab, and to show them that this matter they were engaged in was one for which all believers had suffered harm, not only from this nation, but also from previous nations. He gave them an example of suffering even greater than that inflicted upon Bilal, may God be pleased with him. If we look at that time, we will find that those who were tortured, as we mentioned, were either slaves or free men, but their people were responsible for their torture. Among the most famous of those who tortured was Amir ibn Fuhair. It was reported that they tortured him until he fainted and was unaware of what he was saying, meaning until his mind was gone. Another was Abu Fukair, a freed slave named Aflar. He also resembled our master Bilal in the way he was tortured. But with Abu Fukair, they did not place a stone on his chest as they did with Bilal. Instead, they would lay him on the ground in the midday heat and place a stone on his back to prevent him from moving. He, too, was tortured until he fainted, and sometimes they would strangle him severely until they thought he had died. So, this is also what Abu Bakr bought, and Umar ibn Fuhair. Abu Bakr bought and the slave girls, among the well-known ones, are Zunair, a slave girl. Of course, Amir ibn Fuhair, who was with a group from the Azd, he was a freed slave from the Azd. This Zunair was a slave girl with a group said to be from Abd al-Dar. So when they found out that she had converted to Islam, they tortured her. So Abu Bakr bought her and freed her. When he freed her, she lost her sight. Glory be to God, the affliction. So they used to say that nothing took her sight except Al-Lat and Al-Azhar. So she used to say, yes, Al-Lat and Al-Azhar neither harm nor benefit, and nothing took it except God, and if God wills he will restore it to me. So she woke up and God had restored her sight. So they used to say, this is some of Muhammad's magic. You are false. You will not find a way with him. So when harm occurred, they said Al-Lat and Al-Azhar, and when benefit came, they said some of Muhammad's magic. Laughter. So likewise, mention a slave girl named Al-Nardiya and her daughter, and mention a slave girl of Barnu Mamil, and she was from Barnu Adi, and all of these were freed by Abu Bakr, meaning the 7 most famous ones that Abu Bakr, may God be pleased with them, freed. The 7 were Bilal, Amr ibn Fuhair, Abu Faki, Zunair, Al-Nardiya and her daughter, and the slave girl of Bani Mamil. I will remember the 7th, God willing. The point is that our master Ibn Abi Bakr freed these people. Even Mashur, his father, said to him, my son, I see you freeing weak necks. Of course, in the past, whoever bought slaves would buy them. Why? For service, for protection, meaning to strengthen them. He said, if you had freed them, or if you had bought strong slaves one by one, meaning strong ones who would protect you. He said, my father, I only want the hereafter. I do not want this world. So these 7 and his slave girl, the sons of Mumin. This I told you was with a Barnu Adi, who are the people of Umar, and Umar used to torture her before his conversion to Islam. He would beat her until he got tired. Of course, I want you to imagine someone second most important man in Islam. Imagine when someone like this tortures a slave girl and then does not leave her until he gets tired. I imagine that she would leave his hands, meaning finished. So he would say, I will not leave you until I get tired. So she would say, may God make you like that, meaning God is the one who made you safe from this. So she died, and our master Abu Bakr, may God be pleased with them, bought her. And there were those who were free, but they were tortured, the most famous of them being our master Musab ibn Umair. Our master Musab ibn Umair was the most handsome and blessed young man in Quraysh, meaning a young man from the elite. They were talking about his clothes and his scent were so distinctive that people would say, he passed by here, meaning he was a very perfumed man, so much so that you could still smell his fragrance after he left. He also had a certain gait, a swaggering, confident walk. Imagine if he were alive today, he'd be driving the latest model car, wearing the newest brands. We mentioned earlier that one of the most important characteristics of the early Muslims was their independence and determination. Despite their different social circumstances, they were able to make their own decisions and be resolute in carrying them out. Take Bilal, for example, a slave. We could compare him to a servant in a house today. How could this servant understand that a new political party had emerged and he was keen to join it, even though the party was banned and joining it would lead to a military court? But Bilal, despite being a slave, possessed such strength of character, independence of decision, and the ability to observe, think, make decisions, and persevere. This is Bilal, the slave. So what makes someone from the very elite, my friends? It is a well-established tradition that the enemies of the call to Islam are the affluent, as it is said, and we did not send before you any warner to a town except that its affluent ones said, we found our fathers following a certain way, and we are following in their footsteps. No, indeed, they were before that affluent. The affluent, in general, are enemies of the call to Islam in general. If a man emerges from among these affluent people, abandoning all that he possesses, then our master Musab, from the moment he embraced Islam, was denied the money his mother used to give him. The companions said, and Abdullah ibn Saud mentioned, we saw his skin becoming rough and dry. In another narration, it is described as dry, like the skin of a snake. Of course, even if we don't know the precise meaning of dry, the word itself indicates a man who was once comfortable and well dressed and remained so until his death. Our master Musab never experienced luxury. When he died in the battle of Uhud, the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, found only one garment on him. If they covered his feet, his head was exposed, and if they covered his head, his feet were exposed. The Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, wept. May God's peace and blessings be upon him. He said, I witnessed this, and there was no young man in Mecca living a more comfortable life than our master Uthman ibn Affan. His uncle took him and wrapped him in a palm leaf mat and smoked him from underneath. It's like being in an enclosed space and tear gas canisters are fired at you, wrapped in a palm.
طبعا بعض الناس لم يقدروا أو لم تسمح ظروف العائلة إن هم يضطهدوهم بدنيا، فبعضهم اضطهدوه نفسيا ومعنويا مثل سيدنا سعد بن أبي وقاص. هذا قالت له أمه والله لا آكل ولا أشرب ولا
Leaf mat, and the place is filled
ولا تستهينوا بهذا. يعني الآن ربما نحن في عصر
And underestimate this. Perhaps we are in an
في زمان العرب
age of widespread disobedience, but in the time of the Arabs, honoring one's parents was a noble virtue. Even Abu Jahl, who was known for his noble character, was dutiful to his mother. So, how about someone who was already known for his piety? In our time, many people are reverting to this through commitment and righteousness out of consideration for his father and mother. Many things happen, but our master Sa'd ibn Qais said, "O my mother, by God, even if you had 1,000 lives and each one departed, I would not abandon the religion." The point is,
المهم يعني الصحابة رضي الله عنهم، يعني هذا الدين الذي وصلنا الآن ونقرأه في المجالس ونعرفه 1 2 3 4 إنما جاء عبر الدماء والأشلاء والعذاب، لم يأتي لنا بسهولة.
the companions, may God be pleased with them, this religion that has reached us now, that we read in gatherings and know, came through blood, dismemberment, and torture. It did not come to us easily. The companions, may God be pleased with them, endured so much and persevered for the sake of God. Our master Sa'd ibn Zayd, for example, said, our master Sa'd ibn Zayd, who was the cousin of Umar ibn al-Khattab, Sa'd ibn Zayd ibn Amr ibn Nufayl, and we mentioned that he was Umar ibn al-Khattab ibn Nufayl, and he was his brother-in-law. He said, by God, you saw me and my brother bound, both of us, for Islam before he embraced it. In short, the scenes of torture that the companions endured are scenes that anyone who witnessed them would know that this religion is precious and that it did not come to us so easily. So, of course, the first to be martyred under torture was Yasser. Yes, Yasser, the father of Amr. Yes, Yasser, the father of Amr. Amr was an old and weak man, and Abu Jahl, of course. Oh, I'm good that I can differentiate between this and that, my friends. There's a difference between a slave and a master. There's a difference between a slave and a master. A slave is bought and sold. A slave is bought and sold, that's right. But a master is never a slave, he's attached to the people, a follower of the people. Consider him a servant of the people. Okay, how did he become a master? There are many things, but the custom was that if a slave was freed by his master, because back then there was no such thing as a state, there was nothing. I mean, what I want to say is a person's identity at that time was their belonging to a tribe or a family. That was their identity. Otherwise they had no rights, they were lost. So, if a slave was captured, or if his connection with his family, who were his blood ties, was severed, then he would become attached to the people whose slave he was. He would become their master. That's right, and that's why, when our master Abu Bakr freed these people, they became known as Abu Bakr's clients. So, the slave was bought and sold, but the Yasser and his followers were loyal to the Banu Makhzum. We mentioned the Banu Makhzum, the people from whom Abu Jahl and al-Walid bin al-Mughira came. These people had freed them and they became their allies, and they were the ones who took charge of torturing them. Of course, when we say Banu Makhzum, who took charge of the torture, Abu, this man was in charge of the file. We'll bring Abu Jahl with us. Abu Jahl was in charge of the Islam file in Mecca. This is someone who, when he feels things have calmed down, tells them, are you going to let Muhammad humiliate himself before you? So, if things are calm, what's he doing? It's narrated that Abu Jahl never heard of anyone converting to Islam without going to them. You'd think he was in charge of the file, the head of the anti-Muhammad department in National Security. If the person was honorable, influential, and powerful, he would humiliate them, admonish them, and threaten them with financial loss. This is what he calls honor. If the person was weak, he would beat them or incite others against them, depending on the law and the Constitution. If the law and the Constitution allowed him to beat them, he would beat.
فأبو جهل هذا كان يتولى تعذيب طبعا مواليه أولى الناس أبو جهل كان يتولى مواليه يتولى تعذيب مواليه.
Them, if not, he would look for someone suitable to beat and someone suitable to take charge of. So, Abu Jahl was in charge of torturing his own people. He was the first to torture his own people. Abu Jahl was in charge of torturing his own people. He would take them out to the bloodbath, the hot square. The first to die was Yasser, the father of Amr, who couldn't endure the torture. He was followed by his wife, Sumayr. It is narrated that Abu Jahl had verbally abused her. Of course, the torture wasn't just physical. He verbally abused her. The narrations don't mention what he said, but we can imagine it. You know, like they say, for example, sexual jihad in Rabar and like those TV series and such things. You know, falsehood is all the same. The narration says that he verbally abused her, and she verbally abused him back. It seems she couldn't bear it either, so she responded harshly. He stabbed her in her private parts with his spear, in her most private place, and she died from it. She was an old and weak woman, and of course, as I told you, the tribe enjoys sovereignty. No one asks why someone kills. There are no human rights here, not at all. Everyone kills their slave, kills their master, beats, and tortures. May God bless our Prophet Muhammad. I was talking about Abu Jahl, but I meant yes, indeed. Some people were martyred in this torture, the first of whom was Amr, then Sumayr. Abu Jahl did not succeed. Later with our master, I mean Yasser, Amr's father, and then with our master Amr, our master Said ibn Jubair, the master of the Tabi'in, as Ibn Hisham narrates in the biography. He says, I said to Ibn Abbas, did the polytheists inflict upon the companions of the Messenger of God something that would excuse them from abandoning their religion or from speaking? Ibn Abbas said, yes, by God, they would seize a man, beat him, starve him, and make him thirsty until he could not even sit upright. They would even say to him, Al-Lat and Al-Uzza are gods besides God, and he would say yes, not knowing what he was saying. Then, when he passed by them, they would say, is this your God besides God? And he would say, yes. So, the torture that befell the companions was torture that exhausted their strength. A man could not sit upright and did not know what he was saying. They inflicted upon them something that would excuse a man. There is also something I want to say here. There are accounts from this period, my friends, that we do not know. The Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, was precious soul. We don't know everything he went through, to the point that there's a hadith, and this hadith remains problematic even today, as I've seen. Some scholars discuss its difficulties, in which the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, said, I was harmed for the sake of God in a way that no one else has been harmed, and I was frightened for his sake in a way that no one else has been frightened. And 30 nights passed, during which neither I nor Bill had any food to eat, except for something that Bill could hide under his armpit. A Prophet is talking about 30 days in his life when he had nothing to eat except what Bill could hide under his armpit. But when did This period occur, we don't know. I kept researching this hadith and trying to understand it. When did this happen? Where was Abu Bakr? Where was Khadijah? I didn't know until I found Al-Amir al-Sanani in his commentary on Al-Jarmi, who says God knows best the wisdom behind mentioning Bilal. There's also a problem here, in the verse and the hadith and in what period it occurred. This hadith was narrated by Al-Tirmidhi and others, and its chain of narration is good. But I bring up this hadith to say that not all counts of torture are known, and even some torture that befell the Prophet, the details of which we don't know. So far, everything is fine. How much longer until dinner, Sheikh? No, it's not medical. We will come to that, God willing, at that time. But here the Prophet is talking about an early matter. He says, I was harmed for the sake of God, and no one else was harmed, and I was frightened for his sake, and no one else was frightened. So what are we talking about? From an early period? Yes, or at least he and Bilal, whatever this period. Anyway, I meant to say, I mentioned that Prince al-Sanani in the explanation of Al-Jarmi outside here says, let me quote the text to you. He says, and God knows best what is the wisdom in mentioning Bilal without Khadijah and his children. For Bilal did not accompany him, except after Khadijah, and Khadijah was wealthy, so the matter here is problematic. Okay, well, in any case, here we should pause before three questions. The first question is, why does falsehood resort to torture? Why, for example, does it not resort to killing? That's a question. The second question is, why are believers tested and why does God let them be tormented? This is the second question. The third question is, what was the reaction of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, and the Muslims to this torment? Okay, let's focus a little on what's coming because it's important. Let's start with the first question. Why does falsehood resort to torture? Now, we said that the head of the family or the head of the tribe has the right to kill his slave and no one questions him, right? As is attributed to Lisan al-Din ibn al-Khattab, who said, praising him who would reproach a master for his slave, right? May God bless the Prophet. Falsehood, my friends, is characterized by arrogance. So, someone leaving it is a slap in the face to the pride of falsehood. Therefore, it is true that this falsehood can kill the one who leaves it. It can. But if this one who leaves it dies or is killed, then this killing is in reality a defeat for this falsehood. Right or not? So why does he resort to torture? So that the one who has strayed from falsehood may testify that he has sinned and that he returns and repents. For example, let me tell you the most famous example, which you all know. Now, how many years has Israel existed? For 70 years. What is the obstacle that is still being demanded in the corridors of negotiations and in the back rooms of politics? Recognition of Israel's right to exist. It exists, right? I mean, now, whether I recognize it or not. Does this affect its existence in any way? It does exist. But recognition of Israel's right to exist, to remain, and to be safe is the First item on the agenda for any resistance movement or even for a state. I mean, now Netanyahu is very happy about normalization, and of course, it was before the Al-Aqsa flood. Normalization will be with intend to complete it. But now I am telling you about the issue of falsehood, which is bothered by the fact that there are those who do not recognize it, even though this recognition or non-recognition may not, in reality, affect the existence of falsehood. Right? Okay, let me tell you another famous old example, the hairdresser of Pharaoh's daughter. Pharaoh, the ruler of Egypt, used to say, "Is not the kingdom of Egypt mine, and these rivers flowing beneath me?" He would also proclaim, "I am your Lord, Most High, and I know of no other God for you besides me." All of this was said to him, Armin. When this man heard that his daughter's hairdresser had believed in him, he stopped all state affairs. He put the government on hold, and what did he do? He personally took it upon himself to torture his daughter's hairdresser, who was completely unknown and obscure, whom no one knew or had ever heard of. Now, if you think about your own president, or even the president of America, who knows Biden's daughter's hairdresser, who even thought to know her, what if Biden's daughter's hairdresser had a different opinion? Who would care? He stopped all state affairs and brought her in, threatening to throw her children into boiling oil. He wouldn't even throw her in, he'd throw her children in front of her, for falsehood, by its very nature, is arrogance. Pharaoh saw that there was a woman in his palace who didn't believe he was not driven to kill her or to torture her, but to bring her back first to confess his divinity. He kept throwing her children in front of her into the boiling oil. Of course, this means a tremendous degree of faith. Glory be to God, the One. It is almost unimaginable that a mother would see her children as they were being torn apart in front of her in the boiling oil. So he threw in the first, the second, and the third until he came to the infant on her shoulder. They snatched him from her, and she was terrified. As a favor to her, God made this boy, this child, speak to her, saying, "O mother, be patient, for you are on the right path." And God, blessed and exalted is he, made her patient. And indeed, she saw his death. Then he threw her into the oil. But now I am talking to you about the nature of falsehood, that it wants to extract from the people of truth a confession of it, and that when they believed in the truth, they were mistaken and sinned. Therefore, Pharaoh was sure that he could kill the magicians, but he said what? He didn't say to them, "I will kill you, I will torture you, I will cut off your hands and feet on opposite sides, and I will crucify you on the trunks of palm trees, and you will surely know which of us is more severe in punishment and more enduring." Meaning, me or the Lord of Moses. You will surely know which of us is more severe in punishment and more enduring. Of course, falsehood in our time has evolved and become adept at things that can extract this retreat and confession of guilt from the people of truth. And the truth is, the British are gifted in this field. These British, I'll give you an example from Egyptian history. Ahmed Orabi led a revolution against Khedive Torfik, and before him, Khedive Ismail. These were followers of the British, and this revolution, it was, of course, an Islamic revolution, almost succeeded in liberating Egypt. So the British came with their armies to occupy Egypt to preserve the national order, just like the Iranians and Russians when they occupied Syria to preserve the national order. Of course, all with legitimacy and agreement between the president or the Khedive, and they occupied Egypt. And the important thing is that Ahmed or Arbi was arrested. The Khedive was determined to kill him. The court sentenced him to death. The English insisted he not be killed. They insisted he not be killed. The injustice was that he discovered that a long prison sentence is more effective on the soul than death. A long prison sentence is more.
في النفوس من القتل. أنت حين تقتل هذا المناضل يتحول من فوره إلى
When you kill this fighter, he instantly becomes a martyr. Yes, a heroic martyr. But when you imprison him for many years, if he doesn't change and
فسينسى.
admit his mistake, he will forget. We are faced with two possibilities: either he endures and forgets, or he is defeated and becomes a lesson, bearing witness that he erred and
على أنه قد أخطأ وأذنب. هذا
sinned.
مبحث في موضوع الدولة الحديثة عند الفلاسفة.
This is a topic in the study of the modern state among philosophers. One of the most famous writers on this subject was a Frenchman named Michel Foucault when he spoke about the philosophy of imprisonment. Therefore, my friends, a long prison sentence is worse than death. Imam Ahmad, may God have mercy on him, was asked about a man who is
يقاتل أم يستأسر.
between enemies and has no hope of escape. Should he fight or be taken prisoner? He said he should fight. Being taken prisoner is severe. This is Imam Ahmad's statement. Of course, the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, said in his hadiths, free the captive. And Imam Malik said that Muslims must ransom their captives, even if it takes a long time. This means that if the entire budget of the Islamic State were to be exhausted in order to free prisoners, they would have to spend all their money. The matter of captivity is serious. Imam Ahmad said, when asked, we have prisoners, and the enemy has Muslim prisoners. Is it permissible to ransom them with money? Meaning, I have enemy prisoners, and the enemy has Muslim prisoners. Can I ask for money to ransom the enemy prisoners? He said, no, I don't know of any such thing. As long as there are Muslim prisoners, it is not permissible to ransom them with money. Saving lives is a very important principle in Islamic jurisprudence. However, the guiding rule, or the one that has been repeated, or something similar, is that money is more important than lives. So money is spent to save lives. Long imprisonment is a severe ordeal, worse than death. Many people have been affected by long imprisonment to the point of regression. I ask God to place this in the balance of His good deeds. A few days ago, I visited someone who had been imprisoned for 30 years, but when he was released, he was still true to his original faith. By God, my friends, the faith that emanates from such a man is truly remarkable, greater than what you read in books and hear from sheikhs, is finding a man before you who embodies the meaning of faith, someone who, after 30 years, resumes his missionary work with enthusiasm and sincerity. So, why does falsehood resort to torture? Because falsehood, by its very nature, is arrogant. It is concerned and eager to extract from the people of truth a confession that they sinned when they deviated from this truth. And I mentioned to you that falsehood has evolved to the point that many countries have now abolished the death penalty and replaced it with life imprisonment. Yes, imprisonment. The reality of imprisonment. Look, God Almighty has made imprisonment synonymous with tyranny. He has made imprisonment synonymous with tyranny. We have it in Egypt. Egypt is famous for its prisons. We have the oldest prison in history. Laughs we had. I remember a famous Sudanese brother. This Sudanese brother was imprisoned in Egypt. He was passing through an Islamic country, so of course he was tortured and imprisoned. He used to say, "What brought you here, Jesus?" They imprisoned Joseph. Oh, Jesus! Laughter. Imprisonment. Imprisonment is a sign of tyranny because, my friends, imprisonment is proof of the power of authority. Countries where the government is balanced and equitable don't have prison sentences, they have executions. But the more tyrannical a state is, the more it can imprison people. Because when you take someone and imprison them, it's proof of the state's power. It's like, yes, I took this citizen and imprisoned him, and he's in this prison. Whoever can go and do something, let them. That's why, when the wife of the Aziz wanted to break Joseph, she said, "What is the punishment for one who intends evil against your family?" She couldn't say anything but that he be killed. But what breaks the spirit is imprisonment, not imprisonment or painful punishment. He said, "If you do not desist, I will surely make you one of the imprisoned." This is Pharaoh's statement to our master Moses, "I will surely make you one of the imprisoned." He couldn't say one of the killed. Anyway, imprisonment is a sign of tyranny, and it is now a tool of falsehood to break the spirits of the righteous. I mentioned to you that this is a long discussion in the matter of the modern state, and philosophers have written about it, which we cannot elaborate on now. There is a good point, but if someone wants to see this, then I have Mitchell Foucault's book Discipline and Punishment. Well, look, let's not go into this, because it will take up our time, but the important thing is the answer. I knew this, so we come to the second question, which is, why does God test believers? Why does God test believers? And why does he leave them to be tortured? Well, we will continue, God willing, in the next session. We ask God Almighty to teach us what benefits us, to benefit us with what he has taught us, and to increase us in knowledge, peace, mercy,